Hello. I see you're not asleep yet. You don't have to stay awake. Welcome to Boring Fantasy for Sleep. Phantastes. A Faerie Romance. George MacDonald. 1858. Episode 8. In Episode 7, Anodos came to a tower. A stone woman stood at its base, carved, still, waiting. He could not free her. He could not wake her. He could only move on. He went through a door he was told not to open. He is learning that he keeps doing that. Tonight, he comes to a strange country. The giants there are not awake. They sleep beneath the earth, or nearly beneath it. He will do something for them. He will not know why. This is Episode 8, The Buried Giants, Chapters 17 and 18.
Chapter 17. First, I thought, almost despairing, this must crush my spirit now. Yet I bore it, and am bearing. Only do not ask me how. Heine. When the daylight came, it brought the possibility of action, but with it, little of consolation. With the first visible increase of light, I gazed into the chasm, but could not, for more than an hour, see sufficiently well to discover its nature. At last I saw it was almost a perpendicular opening, like a roughly excavated well, only very large. I could perceive no bottom. And it was not till the sun actually rose that I discovered a sort of natural staircase, in many parts little more than suggested, which led round and round the gulf, descending spirally into its abyss. I saw at once that this was my path, and without a moment's hesitation, glad to quit the sunlight, which stared at me most heartlessly, I commenced my tortuous descent. It was very difficult. In some parts I had to cling to the rocks like a bat. In one place, I dropped from the track down upon the next returning spire of the stair, which, being broad in this particular portion and standing out from the wall at right angles, received me upon my feet safe, though somewhat stupefied by the shock. After descending a great way, I found the stair ended at a narrow opening which entered the rock horizontally. Into this I crept, and having entered, had just room to turn round. I put my head out into the shaft by which I had come down, and surveyed the course of my descent. Looking up, I saw the stars, although the sun must by this time have been high in the heavens. Looking below, I saw that the sides of the shaft went sheer down, smooth as glass, and far beneath me, I saw the reflection of the same stars I had seen in the heavens when I looked up. I turned again and crept inwards some distance, when the passage widened, and I was at length able to stand and walk upright. Wider and loftier grew the way. New paths branched off on every side. Great open halls appeared, till at last I found myself wandering on through an underground country, in which the sky was of rock, and instead of trees and flowers, there were only fantastic rocks and stones. And ever as I went, darker grew my thoughts, till at last I had no hope whatever of finding the White Lady. I no longer called her to myself my White Lady. Whenever a choice was necessary, I always chose the path which seemed to lead downwards. At length, I began to find that these regions were inhabited. From behind a rock, a peal of harsh, grating laughter, full of evil humour, rang through my ears. and looking round, I saw a queer, goblin creature with a great head and ridiculous features, just such as those described in German histories and travels as kobolds. "What do you want with me?" I said. He pointed at me with a long forefinger, very thick at the root and sharpened to a point, and answered, He, what do you want here?" Then, changing his tone, he continued, with mock humility, "Honoured sir, vouchsafe to withdraw from thy slaves the lustre of thy august presence, for thy slaves cannot support its brightness." A second appeared and struck in, "You are so big, you keep the sun from us. We can't see for you, and we're so cold." Thereupon arose, on all sides, the most terrific uproar of laughter, from voices like those of children in volume, but scrannel and harsh as those of decrepit age, though, unfortunately, without its weakness. The whole pandemonium of fairy devils, of all varieties of fantastic ugliness, both in form and feature, and of all sizes from 1 to 4 feet, seemed to have suddenly assembled about me. At length, after a great babble of talk among themselves, in a language unknown to me, and after seemingly endless gesticulation, consultation, elbow nudging, and unmitigated peals of laughter, they formed into a circle about one of their number, who scrambled upon a stone, and much to my surprise, and somewhat to my dismay, began to sing, in a voice corresponding in its nature to his talking one, from beginning to end, the song with which I had brought the light into the eyes of the White Lady. He sang the same air too, and, all the time, maintained a face of mock entreaty and worship, accompanying the song with the travestied gestures of one playing on the lute. The whole assembly kept silence, except at the close of every verse, when they roared and danced and shouted with laughter, and flung themselves on the ground in real or pretended convulsions of delight. When he had finished, the singer threw himself from the top of the stone, turning heels over head several times in his descent. And when he did alight, it was on the top of his head, on which he hopped about, making the most grotesque gesticulations with his legs in the air. Inexpressible laughter followed, which broke up in a shower of tiny stones from innumerable hands. They could not materially injure me, although they cut me on the head and face. I attempted to run away, but they all rushed upon me, and laying hold of every part that afforded a grasp, held me tight. Crowding about me like bees, they shouted an insect swarm of exasperating speeches up into my face, among which the most frequently recurring were, "You shan't have her. You shan't have her. He. She's for a better man. How he'll kiss her. How he'll kiss her." The galvanic torrent of this battery of malevolence stung to life within me a spark of nobleness, and I said aloud, "Well, if he is a better man, let him have her." They instantly let go their hold of me and fell back a step or two, with a whole broadside of grunts and humps, as of unexpected and disappointed approbation. I made a step or two forward, and a lane was instantly opened for me through the midst of the grinning little antics, who bowed most politely to me on every side as I passed. After I had gone a few yards, I looked back and saw them all standing quite still, looking after me like a great school of boys, till suddenly one turned round and with a loud whoop rushed into the midst of the others. In an instant, the whole was one writhing and tumbling heap of contortion, reminding me of the live pyramids of intertwined snakes of which travellers make report. As soon as one was worked out of the mass, he bounded off a few paces, and then, with a somersault and a run, threw himself gyrating into the air, and descended with all his weight on the summit of the heaving and struggling chaos of fantastic figures. I left them still busy, at this fierce and apparently aimless amusement. And as I went, I sang, "If a nobler waits for thee, I will weep aside. It is well that thou shouldest be of the nobler bride, for if love builds up the home where the heart is free, homeless yet the heart must roam that has not found thee. One must suffer, I for her, yield in her my part. Take her, thou art worthier. Still I be still my heart, gift ungotten, largesse high, of a frustrate will, but to yield it lovingly is a something still." Then a little song arose of itself in my soul, and I felt for the moment, while it sank sadly within me, as if I was once more walking up and down the white hall of fantasy in the fairy palace. But this lasted no longer than the song, as will be seen. Do not vex thy violet, perfume to afford, else no odour thou wilt get from its little hoard. In thy lady's gracious eyes, look not thou too long, else from them the glory flies, and thou dost her wrong. Come not thou too near the maid, clasp her not too wild, else the splendour is allayed, and thy heart beguiled. A crash of laughter, more discordant and deriding than any I had yet heard, invaded my ears. Looking on in the direction of the sound, I saw a little elderly woman, much taller, however, than the goblins I had just left, seated upon a stone by the side of the path. She rose as I drew near and came forward to meet me. She was very plain and commonplace in appearance, without being hideously ugly. Looking up in my face with a stupid sneer, she said, "Isn't it a pity you haven't a pretty girl to walk all alone with you through this sweet country? How different everything would look. Wouldn't it? Strange that one can never have what one would like best. How the roses would bloom and all that, even in this infernal hole. Wouldn't they, Anodos? Her eyes would light up the old cave, wouldn't they?" "That depends on who the pretty girl should be," replied I. "Not so very much matter that," she answered. "Look here." I had turned to go away as I gave my reply, but now I stopped and looked at her. As a rough, unsightly bud might suddenly blossom into the most lovely flower. Or rather, as a sunbeam bursts through a shapeless cloud and transfigures the earth, so burst a face of resplendent beauty, as it were through the unsightly visage of the woman, destroying it with light as it dawned through it. A summer sky rose above me, grey with heat. Across a shining, slumberous landscape looked from afar the peaks of snow-capped mountains, and down from a great rock beside me fell a sheet of water, mad with its own delight. "Stay with me," she said, lifting up her exquisite face and looking full in mine. I drew back. Again the infernal laugh grated upon my ears. Again the rocks closed in around me, and the ugly woman looked at me with wicked, mocking hazel eyes. "You shall have your reward," said she. "You shall see your white lady again." "That lies not with you," I replied, and turned and left her. She followed me with shriek upon shriek of laughter as I went on my way. I may mention here that although there was always light enough to see my path and a few yards on every side of me, I never could find out the source of this sad, sepulchral illumination. Chapter 18. In the wind's uproar, the seas raging grim, and the sighs that are born in him. Heine. From dreams of bliss shall men awake, one day, but not to weep. The dreams remain, they only break, the mirror of the sleep. Jean-Paul Hesperus. How I got through this dreary part of my travels, I do not know. I do not think I was upheld by the hope that any moment the light might break in upon me, for I scarcely thought about that. I went on with a dull endurance, varied by moments of uncontrollable sadness, for more and more the conviction grew upon me that I should never see the White Lady again. It may seem strange that one with whom I had held so little communion should have so engrossed my thoughts, but benefits conferred awaken love in some minds, as surely as benefits received in others. Besides being delighted and proud that my songs had called the beautiful creature to life, the same fact caused me to feel a tenderness unspeakable for her, accompanied with a kind of feeling of property in her. For so, the goblin selfishness would reward the angel love. When to all this is added an overpowering sense of her beauty and an unquestioning conviction that this was a true index to inward loveliness, it may be understood how it came to pass that my imagination filled my whole soul with the play of its own multitudinous colours and harmonies around the form which yet stood, a gracious marble radiance, in the midst of its white hall of fantasy. The time passed by unheeded, for my thoughts were busy. Perhaps this was also in part the cause of my needing no food and never thinking how I should find any during this subterraneous part of my travels. How long they endured I could not tell, for I had no means of measuring time. And when I look back, there was such a discrepancy between the decisions of my imagination and my judgment as to the length of time that had passed that I was bewildered and gave up all attempts to arrive at any conclusion on the point. A grey mist continually gathered behind me. When I looked back towards the past, this mist was the medium through which my eyes had to strain for a vision of what had gone by, and the form of the White Lady had receded into an unknown region. At length, the country of rock began to close again around me, gradually and slowly narrowing, till I found myself walking in a gallery of rock once more, both sides of which I could touch with my outstretched hands. It narrowed yet, until I was forced to move carefully in order to avoid striking against the projecting pieces of rock. The roof sank lower and lower, until I was compelled, first to stoop, and then to creep on my hands and knees. It recalled terrible dreams of childhood, but I was not much afraid, because I felt sure that this was my path, and my only hope of leaving fairyland, of which I was now almost weary. At length, on getting past an abrupt turn in the passage, through which I had to force myself, I saw, a few yards ahead of me, the long-forgotten daylight shining through a small opening, to which the path, if path it could now be called, led me. With great difficulty, I accomplished these last few yards and came forth to the day. I stood on the shore of a wintry sea, with a wintry sun just a few feet above its horizon edge. It was bare and waste and grey. Hundreds of hopeless waves rushed constantly shorewards, falling exhausted upon a beach of great loose stones that seemed to stretch miles and miles in both directions. There was nothing for the eye but mingling shades of grey, nothing for the ear but the rush of the coming, the roar of the breaking, and the moan of the retreating wave. No rock lifted up a sheltering severity above the dreariness around. Even that from which I had myself emerged rose scarcely a foot above the opening by which I had reached the dismal day. more dismal even than the tomb I had left. A cold, death-like wind swept across the shore, seeming to issue from a pale mouth of cloud upon the horizon. Sign of life was nowhere visible. I wandered over the stones, up and down the beach, a human embodiment of the nature around me. The wind increased. Its keen waves flowed through my soul. The foam rushed higher up the stones. A few dead stars began to gleam in the east. The sound of the waves grew louder and yet more despairing. A dark curtain of cloud was lifted up, and a pale blue rent shone between its foot and the edge of the sea, out from which rushed an icy storm of frozen wind that tore the waters into spray as it passed, and flung the billows in raving heaps upon the desolate shore. I could bear it no longer. "I will not be tortured to death," I cried. "I will meet it halfway. The life within me is yet enough to bear me up to the face of death, and then I die unconquered." Before it had grown so dark, I had observed, though without any particular interest, that on one part of the shore, a low platform of rock seemed to run out far into the midst of the breaking waters. Towards this I now went, scrambling over smooth stones, to which scarce even a particle of seaweed clung, and having found it, I got on it and followed its direction, as near as I could guess, out into the tumbling chaos. I could hardly keep my feet against the wind and sea. The waves repeatedly all but swept me off my path, but I kept on my way till I reached the end of the low promontory, which, in the fall of the waves, rose a good many feet above the surface, and in their rise was covered with their waters. I stood one moment and gazed into the heaving abyss beneath me, then plunged headlong into the mounting wave below. A blessing, like the kiss of a mother, seemed to alight on my soul. A calm, deeper than that which accompanies a hope deferred, bathed my spirit. I sank far into the waters and sought not to return. I felt as if once more the great arms of the beech tree were around me, soothing me after the miseries I had passed through, and telling me, like a little sick child, that I should be better tomorrow. The waters of themselves lifted me as with loving arms to the surface. I breathed again, but did not unclose my eyes. I would not look on the wintry sea and the pitiless grey sky. Thus I floated, till something gently touched me. It was a little boat floating beside me. How it came there I could not tell, but it rose and sank on the waters, and kept touching me in its fall, as if with a human will to let me know that help was by me. It was a little gay-coloured boat, seemingly covered with glistering scales like those of a fish, all of brilliant rainbow hues. I scrambled into it and lay down in the bottom with a sense of exquisite repose. Then I drew over me a rich, heavy, purple cloth that was beside me, and lying still, knew by the sound of the waters that my little bark was fleeting rapidly onwards. Finding, however, none of that stormy motion which the sea had manifested when I beheld it from the shore, I opened my eyes, and looking first up, saw above me the deep violet sky of a warm southern night, and then, lifting my head, saw that I was sailing fast upon a summer sea in the last border of a southern twilight. The aureole of the sun yet shot the extreme faint tips of its longest rays above the horizon waves, and withdrew them not. It was a perpetual twilight. The stars, great and earnest, like children's eyes, bent down lovingly towards the waters, and the reflected stars within seemed to float up, as if longing to meet their embraces. But when I looked down, a new wonder met my view. For vaguely revealed beneath the wave, I floated above my whole past. The fields of my childhood flitted by, the halls of my youthful labours, the streets of great cities where I had dwelt, and the assemblies of men and women wherein I had wearied myself seeking for rest. But so indistinct were the visions that sometimes I thought I was sailing on a shallow sea, and that strange rocks and forests of sea plants beguiled my eye, sufficiently to be transformed by the magic of the fantasy into well-known objects and regions. Yet, at times, a beloved form seemed to lie close beneath me in sleep, and the eyelids would tremble as if about to forsake the conscious eye, and the arms would heave upwards, as if in dreams they sought for a satisfying presence. But these motions might come only from the heaving of the waters between those forms and me. Soon I fell asleep, overcome with fatigue and delight, in dreams of unspeakable joy, of restored friendships, of revived embraces, of love which said it had never died, of faces that had vanished long ago, yet said with smiling lips that they knew nothing of the grave, of pardons implored and granted with such bursting floods of love that I was almost glad I had sinned. Thus I passed through this wondrous twilight. I awoke with the feeling that I had been kissed and loved to my heart's content, and found that my boat was floating motionless by the grassy shore of a little island. Anodos has passed through a country of sleeping giants. He did not wake them. He sang for them, without quite knowing why. And something shifted. Somewhere underground. He does not understand what he has done. That is, perhaps, the only way. To do something that matters. His shadow is still with him. In episode 9, The Old Church. Moth does not mind if you fall asleep before the end. Continue to listen to music by Velicor Dark Academia.